Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm still here with Paul. Hey Paul. So, who is at the table? Meaning, who gets to be where decisions are made? Who gets to be there about how resources are split up or even given out at all? Tell us about the importance of that.
And I do think that truly is an ethical issue.
Yeah.
I think, given what was my principle, that I wanted to broaden educational opportunity and representation in higher education,
Right.
Then who gets to participate in discussions and decisions is really becomes fundamental to that.
Right. Right.
And it's. I think it's always important. I think there's almost no time that somebody's in a position where that question doesn't come up.
Right.
Who is sitting here and who is not sitting here?
Right. Right.
Are we representing a student voice, for example? Are we representing a particular student voice that tends to be underrepresented,
Right.
and so on? So I'm going to talk about it in terms of my current situation, but I think it is something that occurs for everybody.
Right. Right.
But any time that we're in a discussion, whether formal or informal,
Yeah.
where it has policy implications, then a voice has to be resounding in our head that says, who's not here?
Right.
Who is here? Who's not here? And it needs to be reflexive. You know, it's gotten to the point where I walk into a room, and if I'm doing well, then I'm noticing right away who's there and who's not
Right.
there. What voices are missing? What perspectives? What points of view? What experiences are not at the table?
Right. Right. And anybody can do that, you think, or it has to be the chair of that committee, or should any of us at least bring up the case about who is absent?
I think that's a responsibility that we all carry.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to do when you're the chair.
Right, right.
But when you're not the chair,
we might not
then you
feel
still have
power
the
and power.
opportunity to say, you know, as I'm looking around the room, one of the perspectives that I think we're missing is,
Right.
and I think so-and-so would be really terrific in representing that point of view.
Right, right. I agree with you. I sit on a committee that makes decisions about enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the ideas come up about, okay, we need to implement, for example, a deposit,
Mm-hmm.
tuition deposit, things like that, which are helpful. Clearly, it helps the university have the students commit and knowing who is serious about coming. But I find myself often saying, okay, what about students who are first generation low income,
Yeah.
where even that hurdle
Yeah.
can literally derail the student's ability to enroll at the
Yeah.
university,
Yeah.
and what are the possible checks and balances that we can put in place
Yeah.
to allow for an exception or some kind of system.
Yeah.
So that's kind of thing you're referring to.
Yeah, and that's a great example, because I think sometimes we tend to be more aware if we are meeting around an issue that we consider to be a diversity issue.
Right.
And then we might start counting and figure out gender and ethnicity and all of that. But in other circumstances, you know, student accounts, accounting policies, you might think, well, you know, that doesn't have anything to do with representational issues.
Right.
Not the case. One of the fascinating things to watch, I think, is the difference in the conversation when there's broader representation in the room. It literally changes what is said and what is not said as soon as a different perspective is in the room
Right.
than is traditionally there.
Right.
And so it really changes the style, the content of all that is
Right.
said. So I think it's incumbent on us, simply because we are aware,
Right.
to first notice what's missing, who's
Right.
missing, who's not there.
Right. Right.
Second, to go about making sure that there is representation. So sometimes it means saying to the chair or the committee, here's what I notice, let's think about this. Sometimes it means strategizing in advance. And so as you're asked to be on a committee, to say, oh, who's on that committee?
Right.
Really, have you thought about asking so-and-so? Because this would be an important perspective.
Right,
So you
right.
try and do that up
Yeah.
front. It's a lot easier to do it up front than later.
Right. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking that for a emerging budding professional, they're probably going to go to a few meetings and not kind of know that, but something will tell them, some maybe something intuitive, saying, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. So it's not like they're going to know right away. And then once you kind of get a feel as to, hey, something's not right here, then maybe if you don't know what to do, maybe talk to a mentor or talk to somebody that you trust about this to strategize.
How can I get this done? Now, sometimes it turns out that the system is not flexible, and so somebody might say, no, we can only have 6 members. It's not the right battle all the time. It's not the right battle all the time. That's right. Yeah, you got to choose when. On the other hand, sometimes it's a matter of persistence. So if you haven't been successful right away, then 2 things. One is you find ways to bring it back without being such an annoyance that you discredit yourself, back to our earlier conversation. A second possibility is that it's not going to change. Or here's another possibility. Some decisions get made because you're driving down to Denver for a meeting and you're in a conversation with people of position. And you end up having the opportunity to speak to those issues. And again, a light bulb needs to go on in your head saying, I'm not just speaking for myself. I've got to represent the voices that aren't here in the car right now. People used to talk about the decisions that are made on the golf course. I don't know about those because I don't play golf, but there are parallels to that. There are places where decision makers end up having informal conversations that end up determining policy, or inform their decisions about policy. And we've got to be conscious of the fact that we're representing not only ourselves, but those voices that tend to be underrepresented and marginalized in our environment.
Yeah. Good. Well, the next topic I'd like to bring up, Paul, had to do with expectations, and not only for ourselves but of others, and that there are clear, that there are high expectations that are consistent with what we believe in. What can you tell us about that?
I think expectations have an awful lot to do with what we're able to accomplish. Somebody has said, actually, Vincent Tinto said it in a conversation, but I don't know if he made it up.
And Vincent Tinto, he's an expert on retention, right? He's very well known.
Right, sociologist, probably one of the most central figures in the field of student retention.
Right. So our students who are in this profession, Vincent Tinto, get to know him. So.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, and he's very approachable. But he would say, in the context of retention, well, nobody rises to low expectations. And that's patently true. In fact, over time, I've had a chance to watch how there are certain environments where somebody can enter that environment, and because of the environment, they suddenly become the best that they can be. Or, alternately, they sink to the lowest expectations. I've been in situations myself where I am suddenly reduced to early adolescence because so little is expected of me.
It's not hard for some of us to get there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But knowing that there are those environments, and there are people that you can be around as well, who you find that you are your best self because they expect so much of you. I have really come to believe that one of the worst insults is to have little expected of you. That really tells you what people think about your capacity. For our students, I think that is clearly true. We need to expect the best of them. If it makes them uncomfortable to expect more of them, that's okay. Now, I think sometimes people translate that into thinking, well, I'm simply going to expect somebody to function at the highest level right now. I think what it means is you believe in students' capacity, and so you let them know what you expect of them, and then you provide the pathway for them to get there. You either figuratively or literally say, and I'm going to help you get there. I'm going to be clear about the steps that it's going to take for you to get there.
And as practitioners, we really have to believe that the students can succeed. So I'm thinking, as a parent, I'm thinking if my kid gets accepted to X college, I clearly expect that college to provide my son or daughter a high level of service, for them to expect their best and to provide that. So I'm thinking that in return, we as practitioners need to also believe in that. So the students that come to us, that we meet them at a place where we provide both high expectations, but also the support.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and that's where the whole theory about challenge and support comes into play.
Right, right.
But we want to be in a position where if we're going to have to defend something that we've done, we defend it on the basis of we've set up a system and we've set up experiences to expect the best of students.
Right.
And if we've erred, it's on that side.
Right.
But clearly, it's not just about challenge. It is also about the pathways. It is also about support along the way. I can look back at programs, you and I have worked in access programs, Oscar, and clearly I think one of the things that's characteristic of programs in the Access Center is that it meets students where they are, but clearly it is about expectation.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why it has always been so successful. Over time, over and over again, it's successful with students. Why? Because it is helping students to get to a place. It is not making excuses for students.
Right.
It's not apologizing for students. It's not saying, gee, you based on issues of circumstance and income and so on, no wonder that these things aren't possible for you. It is quite the opposite.
Right.
Whatever your circumstances, I'm going to help you get to where you want to go.
Right.
But I think it's a hugely important principle, and I end up, I think subconsciously, recognizing in people where they are on that scale of expecting things from students versus apologizing for students.
Right.
And if they both expect things and are wise enough to figure out how they can assist students in getting there, those are people who are doing well by students. And it's truly a sound educational practice.
And which clearly puts the university in a position where they're taking ownership of their ethical obligation to help the students succeed. Yeah. Not just bring them in and say, hey, all right, kids, we admitted you, go out and do your own thing. But it is this ethic of responsibility about caring for the students, not, like you said, not apologizing or making excuses, but making sure that they know what's expected and also provide results.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like the way that you put that, because in an educational environment, it's like ours, we've got two forces operating, and one is kind of the historically based meritocracy kind of
you're here because you earned it kind of thing.
Right. This is all about merit, and then we've got the other that is about access and equity. And sometimes those meet in different ways. They both have validity. Sometimes the perversion of the
meritocracy.
Thank you. Argument is we just want to work with students who are top notch, who are very sophisticated in their learning, who score the best on their ACTs. I think that's a perversion of that argument. What we really want is an environment that gets people from here to here, not an environment where we are proud of the fact that we only accept those people, we select those people who have already been highly advantaged and highly successful. What's the pride in that? We want to be, we want to position ourselves so that we are proud of the fact that we can bring students in at this level, and we have systematic supports in place that help students to get to this level. And the value-added proposition.
Value added, and that's where the real work is, because you and I can have a top-notch university, but just admitting that top 1% of students across the nation, right? So right away, we'd be the Harvard of Colorado without doing a whole lot of work. We just admit students who are already prepared, but the real work is how do we get students from here to here, and that's the real work. And it's not always easy, but is what that's what we're all about in our profession.
Right, and from a student success perspective, that's one of the fundamental premises that we're working on embedding in the university process. the idea that we have high expectations, that we have systematic support, and that we are taking pride in the growth that occurs.
Right.
And then that's, I think, is truly a part of the land grant ethic at its best.
Right, right. Well, Paul, taking a slightly different take on our conversation, there's this issue about confidentiality. So about how do we manage what we say, to whom, and for what reasons. Basically, how do we manage our mouth?
Yeah.
And because clearly you can undo a lot of goodwill by a comment that you can't take back, or maybe, and it can be not just one thing, right? It could be a habitual thing where if you're talking stuff, maybe people will not respect you or trust you. How does confidentiality play into our ethical behavior on the campus?
Yeah. I think it's a key issue. How underneath that is how we're managing information. And we have access to information. We have access to information about students, about fellow staff members, about other people at the university, on and on. And the longer we're in it, the more information that we have, and the more access we have. And so it raises the question of how one manages that. And I think the principle that we want to operate with is one of respect. The idea that that we're going to manage the information, the privileged information that we have, and we're going to manage that in a way that is respectful to the people involved. So, a simple principle, I can hear my mom's voice in the back of my head still saying, you don't talk to people, don't talk about people behind their backs. And that is really an important principle. You don't talk about people behind their back. And everyone always, even though they're interested in your story, they want to hear it, they're also recognizing that you'll probably talk about them behind their backs as well. So being confidential and being respectful. Now, there are people, there are one or two people that are, in essence, my confidants, who I will talk with about almost anything. And we have an agreement. We are absolutely 100% confidential. Nothing will ever go beyond our conversation. And so in those instances, I'm not guarded, and I'll tell it exactly as it is. But that's a protected environment that I know that I can trust. Outside of that, I'm always guarded, and I'm always wanting people to know that I will protect their confidentiality. Now, there are always instances where you can't keep confidence, where something happens, something's done in the system that is not right, and of course those things cannot be confidential. But I'm talking about just routine engagement, the ways that we talk with and about people in our daily lives.
They have to do not so much the legalistic things that we're obligated to if we're told we need to, but this is more of how we either build or discredit our credibility by how we communicate. So if we have a habit of speaking the truth, which is a great segue to our next subject, is always telling the truth, and that helps clearly establish credibility. It's got to be a fundamental principle that we, no matter what the stakes, we tell the truth, that we don't exaggerate. I can't tell you how many times I'm tempted to fudge the data,
make it look different, to make a claim that I can't substantiate. And the temptation is always there. And oftentimes we can rationalize it because we can say, I know this is true, I just don't have the data. But I think we've got to be able to say, I don't have the data behind this, but this is what my experience leads me to believe. And so we can be honest in those ways. I think, go ahead.
And you'll be able to make that claim at that point in time if you don't have the credibility already established in all the ways that we talked about before. Then that comment is not going to go anywhere. But if we have done all the right things, then at least we can make that temporary claim to say, hey,
Uh-huh.
I don't have the data, but take me for now. Take me on my word for now. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And you can always say, you know, I don't have that, but I can get it for you. I'll get back to you on that.
Right.
You can always say that. I think it's another piece of the honesty is to be in the habit of challenging people appropriately for things that you think aren't right, even if they're people that have more power than you do. And of course, you have to be judicious. You have to be thoughtful about when and how you're going to challenge things. But to be able to say, you know, Oscar, I don't agree with you on that. And then Oscar always knows that he can count on where I stand.
Right.
Now, you don't want to do that stupidly.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it offensively, and you don't want to be in a posture of challenging everything clearly.
Right.
But the idea that you're not going to keep quiet about things that are really important.
Right.
And then to practice how to do that appropriately.
Right. Speaking of that balance, how do you come to a decision about what you can live with and what you can't live with? So far we talked about a lot of challenges, a lot of scenarios, and I've known graduates of our student affairs program who go on to take their first job, and they go into a situation that is horrible, whether it's the boss or the institution or the department that are just doing these horrible things.
Yeah.
How do we get a sense of, you know what, I can live with this, or you know what, I can't live with that? How do we manage that balance?
Boy, not an easy thing. And there's probably two levels to it. One is the job that I'm doing. You know, how well does that speak to me?
Right.
You know, back to what I said earlier, I'm about educational opportunity.
Right.
Well, honestly, an awful lot of how I spend my day is tangential to that concern.
Yeah.
But it's really important that I need to care about faculty issues, the things that are affecting the satisfactions and the well-being and the development of faculty.
Right.
I need to care about those things and care about them genuinely.
Right.
But there's this core of things that I care about, and a question that comes up is how much of my job is nurturing that core of things. And there's no way to answer that. I think it's the kind of thing where on any particular day you go home and you'll be on one side or the other of that and say, you know, this was a terrible day. What am I doing here? But so you have to take the longer range, you know. You come to the end of a year and you say, is this something that can sustain me over time? Is this allowing me to further the things that I care most about or not?
Right. And
make those judgments, recognizing that nobody's going to spend 100% of their time on their core value. It's always going to be a broader thing, and that's the only way you can advance your core value is caring about the bigger picture.
Right.
Then the other scenario that you raised is the way things are happening here are not things that I can live with. This environment doesn't have integrity. The environment is oppressive not just to me but to other people as well. People are disrespected here. And I think that's an easier assessment to make because that's not one that we can live in. Now, of course, you know, it's never here or there. It's always shades of this. Right.
And if it was on either extreme, I guess it'd be easy to make the decision, right? Especially if it was on the extreme of really bad. Clearly, it doesn't take much for me to realize I need to move on. But life as it is can be complicated, so it's probably somewhere in the middle. So you get some of the good, some of the bad, and like you said, it depends on where you at the end of the day. Maybe it was a good day, it was bad.
Yeah. It's the dilemmas, the real dilemmas that are in the middle. That's what's hardest to wrestle with.
Right.
Something that I have felt was important for me, and I'm not suggesting this for everybody, but it's true for me. I decided early in my career that I was never going to care for a position so much that I was unwilling to leave it.
Right.
that
You got your escape hatch, your escape plan.
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't, there was going to be no benefit package, no salary, no status that was attached to something that I was doing that was so important that I couldn't, on any particular day, if it were important enough, to say, I'm out of here, so long.
Right.
And that's been kind of liberating for me. I've always, it's allowed me to make that assessment of, do I care about what I'm doing? Is this an environment that I'm willing to be a part of long term?
Right. Because with that approach, the chances of you compromising your ethical stance, your ethical principles, is much less greater because you're willing to you're not so attached to your job.
Yeah.
That you're willing to compromise on something that you really feel strongly about.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Now, truthfully, honestly, there have, back to that heroic stand kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think there have only been a couple times in my life when I thought my job was literally on the line by some action. More often, it is, going back to the beginning of our conversation, it is this succession of small decisions that you make about the ways that you treat people, the way you keep confidence, the way you maintain integrity, the way that you are honest, the ways you remain true to working on the things that you care the most deeply about. It's that small succession of things. And so it isn't as though I've had to think every day about, well, I think I'll leave the job today.
Yeah. We certainly don't want the students to know that every day is a heavy ethical dilemma day, right? It's just, it's once in a while that we have to worry about that. Because most days, because you and I have worked here at Colorado State for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I go back about 24 years, and the good days far outweigh the bad days. It's
Yeah, you can't ever make a decision at the end of a single day unless it's been that critical issue. But I think one of the things is to trust our instincts. Oftentimes I'll go through a day and then I'm driving home and I feel rotten and I can't figure out, why am I feeling rotten? And you go back and replay the day, and eventually you come to a place where, I regret what I said, and that's been in my subconscious. I had to go through the rest of the day and bypass it, but now it's there. Or what this committee is doing doesn't feel right to me. This isn't the right thing to do or the right way to do it. And the good thing is, so often we do have a chance to come back. You don't have to be right at every moment. Maybe at that moment you couldn't figure out what to say or what to do, or you weren't even sure if you disagreed, but driving home or in the shower, you realize, I feel bad about that, and you go in the next, and so then you plan strategy, and the next day you go in and you figure out who it is you're going to talk to and say, this has been eating at me, I couldn't sleep last night, this is what I'm feeling about what was said in that meeting, or what I said in that meeting, and I want to make it right. That's not what I intended to convey. So we do get to redo things what we don't want to do is try and pretend that thing didn't happen, or try and make it right in a non-direct way. I think the best thing is to go back and say, didn't feel right. This is not who I am. This is not what I'm about. This is not what I want our committee to be about. And here's a different way I think we can think about it.
Right. Well, Paul, as we wrap up this great conversation, and by the way, thank you for spending this time with us and with the class.
Pleasure. Absolutely.
Yeah. What can we take away? Any parting words that you have for us as far as how do we develop? How do we maybe take it one day at a time? Clearly, you've had decades to kind of hone your ethical approach. That you have integrated both your intuitive side, but also your intellectual side, and you marry that with your goals and your vision and what you stand for, and kind of you've had a very successful career here at Colorado State University, but clearly it didn't come overnight.
No. I think when I think about ethics and I think about first principles, it's the idea that we are constantly defining ourselves, and that most things aren't indelible, but most things are not practice either.
Yeah.
You know, what I like to say to students is, this is not practice for real life. This is real life.
Yeah.
You're already establishing who you are. You're defining your standards. You're defining what you aspire to and whether excellence is important to you. You're developing your sense of integrity. Even so nothing gets to be thoroughly practiced.
Right.
Early in the first jobs and first days on the job,
Right.
You're beginning to define who you are and what you're about, and whether you're authentic, and whether you have integrity, and whether you're going to have a reputation for hard work and for thoughtfulness and so on.
Right.
And that is a constant lifetime process. And as long as we have that other voice, that other eye that's watching ourselves do things, or at the end of a week or a day or a month or a year saying, do I feel that I'm about the things that I intend to be about?
Right.
And then taking stock and making adjustments. But it is the idea that things that we do are important. That does not mean that frivolity is not important.
Right.
But that's a part of who we are too.
Right.
You know, that part of us that is purely about enjoyment and levity and laughter. But we are defining ourselves constantly, and that is maybe the heart of the ethical process.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Paul. I not only for spending this time with us, but also want to thank you for serving as kind of that voice for me, that eye that over the years you and I have worked together for over the decades. So clearly, you have served that for me. So I want to thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with the students.
Yeah.
And students, I know you have enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
And thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Great compliment. Thank you, Oscar. It's a pleasure, and really pleased to be part of the course and the conversation.
Yeah.